Hi everyone, this is Lindsay with Lindsay's Craft Studio, and I'm a little bit off screen today because these are two really big wide canvases and I wanted to give you the full spectrum experience as we paint this Northern Lights duo painting. Your eyes don't deceive you. If you happen to see in this area, there is a little cat getting a drink, and I'm sure he'll walk off stage at some point. I just saw an ear go by and didn't actually even realize he was behind my canvases until I started filming. Perfect comedic timing that Oliver has. So today's painting is actually engineered to be painted by more than one person. So if you're stuck at home, whether you're quarantining or you're just cuddled up for the winter, you have a day off, this is the type of thing that you're supposed to be doing with more than one person. That being said, I did mine with one person on one canvas. I drew a line down the middle to kind of stand for where your division should be. If you're painting with two people, you would grab two small canvases and put them portrait style. If you're painting with three people, you could get three tall, skinny canvases and it would make the same size image. If you're painting with four people, you would get four small rectangular canvases and put them, as long as you've got something that makes up a rectangle that's about this size and shape, or you can go bigger. As long as it's a rectangle, it's absolutely going to come out exactly the way it's supposed to. So once again, I will be using one canvas because it's just me by myself, because Oliver doesn't know how to paint. Someday he'll learn, I'm sure, through osmosis, but as of right now, it's just me. I have an assortment of brushes. I do have quite a few large flat brushes. Those tend to be what I go for first. I'm not sure if you can kind of see that from there. I have some teeny tiny brushes for the details and things, but most of the detail work with this painting is going to be done with those flat brushes. All of these wispy lines for the Northern Lights and our snow and our whole background is going to be done with those brushes. So make sure that you have a nice wide flat brush on hand before you begin, kind of like so. Since you're painting with another person, you're going to have to communicate. I know it's everybody's least favorite thing to do, especially during couples activities, although this doesn't have to be a couples activity. Like I said, anyone can do this. But you do need to communicate. You need to make sure you're starting at the same spot on any of the canvases that you're using. You need to make sure that you're mixing and blending the same colors in the same amounts. Sometimes you can kind of borrow paint off of each other's palettes to get everything to match properly. But this does take more communication than a regular paint night because you're not working by yourself, you're working with a team. So what we have for colors, hopefully you can see without me tilting too much because mine are a little bit runny. We have pure black, pure white, primary blue, and then these two colors are kind of up to you. You really could use whatever colors for your Aurora Borealis as you would like to. I've chosen yellow and green chiefly because a lot of the places that teach this painting teach it with pinks and purples. And I've been told by people who have seen it that every time they've seen it, it's been more greenish. So I don't know if people just pick neon colors because it looks pretty or if they're trying to be realistic, but I've been told that this is just about as accurate of a representation as far as colors go as I could come up with myself. But you can change up the colors if you want to. You can use things that glow in the dark. It's really up to you. But the most important part of this painting, we're going to be starting with the background first so that everything has time to dry. So I actually always start below the horizon. So wherever you think you want your water to be, you're going to take a big brush and just put primary blue all the way across. So at some point you're going to get to the middle and you're going to have to either hand your brush or coordinate with your partner about who's going to head the rest of the way across this canvas. Okay. Now, in case you're wondering what I put on the background of my painting, the answer is nothing. If you've painted with me before, you will know that I always recycle my canvases. I don't need 20 copies of the same canvas after I teach a class multiple times, so I always paint back to white, and then I reuse them, as my example when I teach. So it looks like I have some fancy gesso or whatever on this canvas. I do not. This is regular white acrylic paint, just to paint it back to white before we began. But I realize you can probably see it, so I always like to address it so you don't feel like you're missing out. In fact, it will be much easier for you to paint on a new canvas than what I'm doing right now, because it's always hard to paint on paint that has started to dry already. It tends to make all the other paint dry more quickly by proxy. So I'm heading pretty much to the bottom of my canvas with this color. And remember that you can pause this tutorial. It is pre-recorded for a reason. So if you need to hit the pause button before the next step, go ahead and do that now. But the next thing we're going to do, you want to make sure you both have black and blue on your brush at the same time, because now we need to start fading in the shading along the bottom of our canvas. And sometimes this works better if you take turns. You know, maybe someone shades for a little while and then someone else gets to take point. But basically all you're doing when you're adding black to blue paint that's already wet, it's going to make this really deep navy color, and that's going to reflect what's up in the sky above once we actually get there. And you want to make sure it's much darker black along the bottom, almost pure black, and that it's kind of a navy-ish color in the middle. And you can see big brush strokes are really key. So like I said, if you have to take turns, please feel free to do so. Make sure that you don't lose your bright blue along this top edge. You want it. It looks really cool in the finished painting, so don't go up too far. I would say about 2/3 of your bottom section here have any black at all, and that top third is mostly pure blue. At this point in time, we are going to rinse out our brush. And now we're going to do something kind of crazy. Most people would say we'd go back to the horizon and you'd start with white and then you fade to the darker colors, but I find that I like to just go back to this regular blue. And I like to give myself some regular blue in the sky first before I start fading to white, because if you have regular blue on your canvas that is nice and wet, it's always easier to blend the white in and make those lighter highlight colors anyway. So we're cheating here, because while we have blue on our brush, or if you're taking turns, you're going to pick up a little bit of white as well. And you're going to use that blue and white mixture that's on your brush to start blending the rest of your sky. So I like this strategy for painting from your primary color to a lighter value, just because I don't have to rinse my brush a million times. I hate having to stop what I'm doing and kind of start over. But you know, the goal is to get a nicely blended light color here. By the time you get to your horizon, you should have like a sky blue. And it's okay if the spot where your sky and your water meets is not perfectly straight. It's okay if it's a little fluffy or feathery, we say, because we're going to be painting some snow there anyway, so not a big deal. Just focus on getting a smooth blend from one side to the other, the best that you can. All right. And when you are finished with that step, you're going to immediately put more primary blue onto your brush. You're going to go over what's on the top again, just to kind of re-wet it with some new blue paint. And then just like we did at the bottom, we're going to take some black and we're going to start adding some black to our sky. And eventually where you overlap your primary color blue is going to turn into that navy color that we have below. So I try for the sky to put a little bit less black and navy mix than I have on the bottom, just because I like the sky to be a little bit brighter. But you do need some of it to be pure black, just purely for contrast's sake. So I think that's enough. I've got like a 1-inch band at the top of my canvas that's pretty much pure black. Now, the most important part about this before we continue is we are actually going to make sure that we dry our canvas thoroughly. And in order to do that, you want to make sure that you are using either a hairdryer or that you take like a 5 or 10 minute break at this point in time. You want to make sure that your canvas is no longer shiny. If it's got any shine to it at all, like you can see here that it's very, very shiny, that means it's still wet. You know, when it is matte, like my example photo, no longer shiny at all, then you'll know that you're dry and you can continue the next step. If we tried to put our snow in place right now, all it would do is turn gray where it touches dark black, and it would turn blue where it touches blue. It wouldn't be a really pure white, so we do need to give this time to dry. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to unplug my audio here so that I can use a hairdryer and set this up a little bit. You can fast forward past this part if you would like until you see me painting again, and then I'll give you the next instructions. Thank you guys for your patience. My painting is now dry. Hopefully yours is as well. If there's any areas that are still wet whatsoever, please pause and then come back when your painting is dry to finish. So the next thing we have to do before we paint any snow, before we worry about our actual Aurora Borealis or anything else in this painting, the very next thing we have to do, actually, believe it or not, is the stars. Because the stars are behind everything else. They're underneath the snow because they'd be reflecting under the water. They're behind the trees. They're behind the northern lights, so those actually come next. So you have a couple of options when you're splatter painting. You can drip from the top down. So if you want to put this on a flat surface, for some people it's easier to just tap the brush. I like to work this way and use a nice big brush so I get some really good splatter. What you're going to do is you're going to take your paint, take a small amount of your white paint so you don't ruin all of it, pull it over to the side and mix a little bit of water into it until it's the consistency of runny ice cream. So you can see it's not dripping off my brush. It's not that watery. It's just thinned down a little bit so that when you pull your finger toward you and flick away from you, you get lots of little teeny tiny splatters here. So this is what we want to be seeing. And this is what helps it look like stars. You're going to do your whole sky and your whole water with just a dusting of white flecks. And always make sure that you're pulling your finger toward you because it will cause the brush bristles to flick away. And I am not panicking about this smudge that I got over here because it happens to be in the perfect place. If you get any smudges or drips and you think they're going to bother you, if they're not behind where you're going to put a tree or they're not behind where you're going to put your Aurora Borealis, make sure that you blend them into the background now before you continue, because trying to smudge them out later is going to be impossible. Once you kind of paint things over the background, you can't really touch the background anymore. We can only move forward. So the next thing we are going to do to plan out our painting is we're going to start putting in where our hills of snow are going to be. So obviously you're going to want to put a white line. You can use a small brush to make your line. You could use a medium brush turned sideways, kind of like I'm doing. It does not have to be perfectly flat because it is snow. It would kind of be melting in different spots. So you will have to decide how tall you want your shapes to be, communicate with your partner, and then kind of put them in right about where you think they should be. This is how I usually plan out my painting, but if you guys are painting in a different style or you're maybe making your mountain peaks a little bit more jagged, totally fine. And then you're just going to fill in those two shapes with some side-to-side lines. And the reason I always go side to side the way that snow would kind of be settling onto a mountaintop or onto some hills is because you're always going to see your brush strokes. So you should always move your brush in a way that makes sense. So when I'm painting anything that's a landscape, I usually go from side to side instead of straight up and down so it doesn't look like grass, so that it actually looks like puffy snow. The areas where your snow overlaps your pond here or your river, whatever you're imagining this is going to be, you're going to start with some side-to-side lines on either side. And it's just easier for me to show you along the right, just because that's the way that my hand moves. And then at some point, about halfway through each line, you're going to connect those lines together with little V shapes. And that is the fastest way that I know of to make riverbanks. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side, and I'll hold it up for you one more time just in case you missed it. So you're going to take your brush, you're going to start putting in some lines side to side. You know, kind of skip around. They don't all have to be perfect. And then keeping your brush facing that same way, you're just going to make a few letter V shapes to connect those things that you just painted on your canvas. And then once you have that, you're going to go ahead and fill them in. Now, I tend to move pretty quick in these classes that I pre-record on YouTube because for whatever reason, YouTube tends to cut out on me after about a half an hour of filming, regardless of what they say they do. I'm not sure if it's because I'm a new account or what the deal is, but they seem to always cut out on me before I'm finished teaching. So we're going to try and move pretty quickly. If you need to pause this at any point in time, remember that you always can. So believe it or not, the next step of this painting is actually the Aurora Borealis itself. You want that to be firmly in your background because your trees are going to be sitting in front of that. Your trees are going to be coming up over what's in the sky. So this kind of allows you to play around with the background before you put the trees in. So typically what I will do is I will water down a little bit of white paint, just so it's a little bit transparent. And then I will kind of sketch out where I want my Aurora Borealis to be. And I mean, keep in mind, they're very sketchy. You know, it's a moving light show. So these lines should be kind of wiggly. You know, they're not solid, super solid lines. And put as many as you want to. I'm kind of imagining that they're starting at this point and they're kind of traveling up and over into the sky. So keep that in mind too. What direction is your movement going? And then the next thing you're going to do is, starting on whatever lines you have made, you're going to take your brush and just do really quick brush strokes up and away. And this is still with that watered down white because we don't want this to be really solid yet, because we haven't added our colors, we haven't done any blending. But you want all of those to go kind of straight up and down. It just kind of adds to that streaky Northern Lights effect. And you always want to have some spots where the sky is still showing through. That is part of what makes this light show so spectacular in nature, as you can still kind of see the stars. You know, you can see where everything is originating from. So don't be afraid to add more lines where it makes sense and add more of your white highlights here. So that is kind of the start of the Northern Lights, and we're pretty much just going to repeat that with a bunch of different colors. So I like to put a little bit of green first and then do my yellow. So this is where this starts to look really cool. You're going to just kind of blend into what you've done before. It all should still be wet because you are using water to blend. You know, so add some green in a few places, always making sure that your brush is heading kind of straight up and down there. And if you need to, you can always kind of trace along the lines a little bit. Those first white lines that you put in to kind of tell you where you wanted to put your Northern Lights, you should be using as a guide. That's why we put them there. It helps us. And you're going to do the same thing with yellow whenever you're ready. You know, if you've got any areas like over here where there's a lot of light show kind of touching next to itself, you might want to add some yellow in there to make it kind of stand out. The other reason we put white behind everything is our yellow is kind of transparent, or at least mine is, so it doesn't come out really bright unless there's white there to begin with. And sometimes I have to go back and forth a few times. Sometimes I'll do some yellow and then go back on top of it with more white and then add more yellow again to get it to pop out. I actually like the way all of this is coming out today much better than my original painting. So hopefully you're also pleasantly surprised with what's going on your canvas. But don't be afraid to mix some white and yellow together to get some areas that are really going to pop out and be nice and bright. Anytime something is not showing up because it's too transparent, sometimes it just needs a little bit of white mixed in and then problem solved. So you can work with this absolutely as long as you want to. Keep in mind, if your sky starts disappearing on you, you've probably got enough Aurora Borealis for a lifetime, so there's really no need to add any more. You don't want to lose all of your beautiful stars. You don't want to lose the nice fade that you did in the sky, so know when to stop. Talk to your partner or partners about that and decide, you know, what you would like to do if you feel like you've got enough or too much. The next thing we need to do is we need to look at where our Aurora Borealis is above in the sky, and we need to put in some reflections where it would be in our painting. So it's going to be reflecting on the snow, and it's definitely going to be reflecting in the water. So I usually will put some side-to-side lines. You can use a smaller brush for this. I usually always use a medium brush turned to the side just because that's how my hands work, but if you need to use a smaller brush to get a more gentle brush stroke, that is also totally fine. And you can go ahead and put some bolder areas. You know, what's going on in your water should be reflected by what's going on up above, so don't put too much. The water should have less. And you can also go ahead and take either white and yellow, white and green, and you can choose areas where you want to add some highlights heading up your snowbanks here. My snowbanks kind of have this weird grayish brownish color in my original painting, and I really don't care for it, so I don't want to do it again. I think that was a mistake because some of my stuff was still wet. If you like that look, you would get that by adding a little bit of black to what you're doing. But I like this kind of shimmery, greenish, illuminated snow look that we have going on here. So that, I think, is what I'm going to stop with. And remember, as always, if you do need to pause, you're absolutely able to do so. I just don't want to run out of space in this video before I teach you the whole thing. So the next thing that we have to do, and if it should cut out while we are doing this, thank you so much for joining me. I would love to see how your paintings come out. Definitely feel free to message them to me on Facebook once this event is over. You can message them to me for about 24 hours after, and I usually put them into a collage. So if you happen to paint along with this in real time, I do want to see what you accomplished, so please share. But we're going to be putting in our evergreen trees. So I usually use a medium brush for that. I will start by stamping out where I want my evergreen trees to go in black paint. And take your time, think this out, decide how many trees you want on one side versus the other. Talk with your partner about how many trees you're going to put, because once you start stamping with that black paint, it's almost impossible to cover them up. So if one person's got way more trees on their side than the other person, sometimes it looks a little bit silly. So go ahead and have a conversation before you begin. And then where you want your trees to kind of look like they're hidden behind the hill, you're not going to paint the bottom of the trees. You're going to follow the shape of the snow. So the bottom of your tree is going to be almost flat across. I use like the corner of my brush as a stamp here to kind of put in big fluffy tree shapes. You could use a smaller brush for this if you need to. Some people like using a tiny brush. I like to use the biggest brush possible whenever I paint trees always, because it just makes things move more quickly. And the bristles kind of do their own thing, and they make it look like, it's really real. There's a bunch of little tiny bristles forming little tiny leaves on trees. I do have several tutorials on my Facebook page right now about how to paint winter trees. I also have a tutorial on TikTok about how to paint icy looking winter trees. So if this is not clear enough instruction for you, or you're struggling, feel free to look around for other information on my page. You would search for Lindsey's Craft Studio, and I have the same logo across all of social media. I'm very brand conscious. I want you guys to always know it's me and not a spammer. So you'll only ever see my logo. And when you are finished stamping in your trees, you're going to add a little bit of yellowish or greenish or whatever colors you decided to use as a highlight along the side of the tree that is facing the Aurora Borealis, based on where your tree is located in your painting. So I know that sounds complicated, but basically all that means is all your trees that are on the left, the Aurora Borealis is on the right of them. So the shadow is going to be on the left, and the bright spots are going to be on the right of those trees. And then over here, all your trees that are on the right, the Aurora Borealis is to the left, which means the shiny spots are going to be to the left. So all of the highlights are on the left-hand side of these trees. And you don't have to put the highlights in. This painting looks cool the way it is. I just thought it was missing a little bit of extra pizzazz. So when I finished this painting the first time around, I picked some spots and kind of put in some green and some yellow along the edge of my trees so it would look like they're being reflected upon as well, because they get to enjoy the light show too. Now this is a very, very simple approximation of a painting. There are about a million things that you could add. You know, you could add a little cabin, you could add some people in a boat, you know, maybe they're sightseeing, they're looking up in their kayak at this gorgeous sky. You could add deer, birds, you know, everything that you could possibly imagine that you want to add to a night sky. You absolutely can feel free to do that and to customize. I always enjoy seeing what people add to their paintings. The only thing I want you to keep in mind is scale. If what you add to your painting is really big, it's going to make your Aurora Borealis look very small. So make sure you add things that are teeny tiny if you're adding anything. These trees are very large. This lake has been here a while. These things are really far away from the camera. So, you know, choose wisely with what you add. And if you happen to customize your painting, don't forget to send me a message either through my Facebook, or you can reach me on my website, which is www.lindseyscraftstudio.com. Lindsey is spelled E-Y, and there's obviously no apostrophe when you're typing it into the internet. But I have a feeling you guys will be able to find me from the comments section on this video. The description has more information and more information about where you can donate. If you enjoyed this class today, I was asking for a $5 donation from every person who watches, and that allows me to continue offering free or reduced classes to all. So if you feel like donating, those donations can be made either by visiting lindseyscraftstudio.com/tips, or you can go to PayPal and you would search for Lindsey's Craft Studio and you would find my tip page and be able to donate there. Or you can type in www.paypal.me/Lindsey's Craft Studio. So hopefully you guys have finished up your paintings. I hope they came out wonderfully. I hope everyone is having a great start to the new year. Don't forget to check me out on social media for more events coming up. And if you are in the continental United States, I do private parties and classes on Zoom and Facebook Live, and I'm happy to ship kits to you for events. So check out lindseyscraftstudio.com for more, and I will see you guys at another craft class very, very soon. Bye, everybody.